Okay, we should be live. So welcome everyone to ACDE number 163. Um, have a basically a lot of Cancun stuff on the agenda today, and then some engine API decisions also probably fall within that. And then if we have time, we can even talk about the validator spec. But I guess to start off, uh, is Dankrad here? Yes, Dankrad is just joining. Amazing. Um, okay, so I guess to kick us off, Dankrad, you wanted to propose a change to the blob limit for EIP 4844. Do you want to take a minute to walk us through, obviously why you want to do that, but mostly sort of the tests you've been doing that you think justify the change?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not going to repeat everything because
Yeah.
I presented that already on
Yep.
HTTC last week. So if you want to have the extended version, then I recommend listening to that recording. So the summary is we ran some tests on mainnet where we created blocks of large sizes. So we simulated a sustained load. And that we tried that between 128 kilobytes and 1 megabyte. And so we did 256 kilobytes to 512 and 768 kilobytes in between. And so in all those tests, the network looked stable. Like we didn't see like lots of validators going offline or anything like that, or like attestations being massively delayed. So none of these happened. What did happen on one of the 1 megabyte tests is that one of the blocks got reorged. So that block was late, was after the 4-second deadline, just passed like by just hundreds of milliseconds, so very close. And so majority of validators didn't attest to it, and so the next proposer reorged it. Didn't happen on any of the other tests. And as a comment, like even under normal conditions, we sometimes see blocks up to like 3.5 seconds into the slot sometimes. And so like we probably did cause this, but probably not by delaying the block by 4 seconds, but probably our delay was only added up to like a proposer that was already pretty slow. So I would attribute that to the very aggressive 4-second deadline and reorging rather than to our tests. Like nothing else went wrong other than that block being late. And so my recommendation based on these tests is that we should consider raising the limit to 6 blobs rather than 4 and the target to 3 because we didn't see any problems with these loads, 168 kilobytes. Please have a look at the data and see if you can agree with that. Also, as a comment from last week, I think, so the tests were sustained loads, so we created 10 blocks in a row with these capacities. So we didn't just send a single block.
Got it.
And maybe final comment, if anyone has a look at these tests and finds something that they would really like to see, we still have all the infrastructure up to do these tests. So ideally, if there are any more tests we should do, I don't think we need more, but if anyone thinks we do, then we should do these soon because it costs a lot to run these nodes and we probably want to sunset them in the next few days otherwise.
Awesome, thanks. Anyone have comments or thoughts on this? And I guess, oh yeah, please, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems pretty reasonable. Maybe it's worth doing the experiment one more time, although they're kind of expensive. But if no one has any reason not to, then yeah, I think we should consider it.
Any specific experience? You mean 768 kilobytes because that's what we're attempting, or what would you like to see? We did 2 of these, by the way, 2 at 768 kilobytes and 2 at 1 megabytes of sustained 10
Right.
block limits.
Yeah, maybe we're more just at like the numbers we liked, and then just try a different day, different network conditions, see what happens.
Do you want to suggest to increase these numbers right from the beginning or after, I don't know, a month of evaluation on the mainnet?
I mean, I would suggest doing it from the beginning, like changing it each time is, at least according to the current setup, is a hard fork. So that's a lot of coordination and takes a lot of our time here. So I think it's reasonable to just do this from the beginning. And like we are doing the decoupled blocks, which should actually be a lot more gentle than the experiments I've done, if what we're claiming and simulating is true. So I would suggest doing this from the beginning.
Does anyone think we shouldn't do this or has issues with this? Gary has a question about like, yeah, what's the max we've pushed the network? Did we reach 1.5, 2 megabyte blocks?
So it's hard to create sustained blobs of that size, because you just are not going to get all your transactions in, and you're competing with other people who want to put in transactions. So one megabyte was okay, although even there we didn't all get into all the blocks that we wanted to. We did in that process create some blocks that were significantly larger. I think the largest was 1.7 megabytes. But yeah, I don't think we will see instability. I don't have any indication on mainnet that this will create instability. And second, I kind of, it's difficult. I don't think we're going to learn that much because we're going to see very erratic loads in practice.
Okay, I guess, does anyone disagree with this change? Ansgar?
Well, I don't disagree per se, and I don't think this is a high chance, but I wanted to at least very briefly also do a temperature check around pushing it to all the way to 4.8, so like up to 1 megabyte maximum. I assume most people would be uncomfortable with that, or because we do have the blob decoupling chunking to give us some extra robustness. So I don't know. I would still think it's worth considering, but if people, of course, feel uncomfortable, we might like 3.6 is also a good compromise, I think.
Daplion has a question around what's the added disk requirement going from, 2 to 3 to 4 target.
Right, I don't know the numbers out of my head, but yeah. I mean, it's an easy computation in this case, right?
Yeah.
One blob is 128 kilobytes over the retention period.
Yeah. Okay, so Ben is saying 2 per slot is 33 gigabytes over 18 days. So 3 would be like around 50-ish, and 4 would be 66, I guess. And then, up to potentially, well, yeah, I guess that's the average loads you're going to get, but probably a bit more given you can go past the target. I guess, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it too late to do 3.6 on DevNet 6? I mean, basically, I think we should just roll this out as soon as possible and see what happens.
Yes, I think if we decide this, we should decide it, if not now, then on the call Monday, so that it's part of DevNet 6. Yeah.
It seems like it's worth doing because.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So we started up at DevNet 6 yesterday, and we had made some progress on it, but there's still quite some client teams that have not joined yet. So this is more of a pre-DevNet 6 launch. We're going to be relaunching it with most clients, hopefully in the coming week. So if we want to make some kind of modification, though, it's entirely feasible.
Okay, so there's a question as well as testing this in the transaction pool. So basically, yeah, are there any issues potentially before the block building funnel? I don't know if there's any thoughts on that, or if that's something we can maybe try on DevNet 6. If not,
This is kind of an orthogonal question, right?
Yeah.
But separately, yeah, we should probably span mempools and make sure nothing falls over.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we can probably move forward to have this at least on DevNet 6 and test it out there. We can also do tests for the mempool, and then once once we have that running, we can reevaluate if we want to keep it like that, potentially move it to 4.8, or even lower it back down to 2.4. But yeah, any objections to moving it to 3.6 for DevNet 6? Ansgar?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as long as there's any chance for it, I would rather have it start at 4.8 and we can always lower it back down, because I think we get just better insights, right? Because there's nothing that would be a problem with 3.6 that won't show up with 4.8, but the other way around it might. So if we want to consider that at all for 4.8 for 4, I think it would be better to start with the larger limit.
Does anyone think we should consider 4.8 aside from Ansgar?
How much data do we have from the experiments Knockred did at 4.8?
Yeah, we have 2 series of that. As I said, nothing major happened to the network. It's just that one of the blocks was delayed, so one block was orphaned.
Right. Okay. I feel like I heard chatter about DevNet 7, so we could do 3.6, and if that looks good and bump it up. We could also go the other way.
I think I'd also go that route. There's a question by Lucas around increasing the attestation time, which, yes, seems like a whole different can of worms. I don't know if anyone.
I think that would be a topic for ACDC, but yes, I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, so we can discuss that next week. Or Danny, I see you coming off back on mute.
I was having technical difficulties right when Ansgar was suggesting 4.8, so I kind of missed that. My gut was that we didn't have data indicating that that was a good idea, and that on testnets we're not going to get that data because it doesn't look like mainnet. So was there an argument that I missed? I apologize. I'm like,
Argument was just that we will do the block decoupling, so we get some extra and chunking, so we'll get some extra robustness with that. And even without that extra robustness, we already only had very minor issues at that size. So it seems worth at least considering for mainnet. And if we want to at least consider it, it seems better to start the testnet on the upper side to see any potential issues come up there, and then we can always lower it for later testnets rather than the other way around. But if the strong consensus is 3.6, then I think it's also fine to do that instead.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure that I would see testnet data and then be convinced that we're good on mainnet, because it's just extremely different topology. But we can take the step towards 3.6 and keep talking.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. I think 3.6 probably makes sense to start. So let's do that. Ansgar says he can open the PR for it. So on the EL side, so if someone can do the corresponding PR on the CL specs, we can move the count to 3.6 and have this part of DevNet 6. Does that make sense, everyone?
And when is DevNet 6, just so I can time if we are doing this release like ASAP, or if I can do this release at the end of next week?
So DevNet 6 already had started, but will be relaunched next week.
Okay, so this is a get this out tomorrow with test vectors and things, rather than wait till the couple other things we're working on. Thank you.
Yes, that's yeah. Yeah, I guess next thing on the agenda was DevNet 6. Barnabas, I know you've been tracking down all the PRs this week. Do you want to give a quick update on where we are, both from a spec perspective and, like you mentioned earlier, basically the first release or live test of DevNet 6?
Sure. So basically, our consensus spec has been released, and we have all agreed we're going to do. If we're going to change this to 3 and 6, I think this will require another release, maybe. I don't know if there's any changes in the consensus spec for that. And then for execution EIPs, we also have most of the or all the PRs merged, and for engine API, there's one more open PR, 398. And other than that, everything else is merged. We currently have the DevNet 6 running with Lodestar and Deku on the CL side, and we have Nethermind, Ethereum JS, and Bezu is not working just yet, but they are already part of it, and Geth is also not working just yet, but they are also part of it. So hoping to do the Lighthouse also by the end of today without any validators, just to see if they can join the network and sync it up. And then hopefully next week we're going to be able to onboard a few more client teams with the relaunch.
Nice. And I guess, okay, so you mentioned this execution API PR. This is about adding fields to the receipts for transactions. So I'm curious, is the blocker there? Yeah, or I guess what is the blocker there to get this merged? I see Live Client and Roberto were going back and forth on it, but
I would be curious about the opinion of the CL devs on this one.
So I think on this PR for execution APIs, add data gas used and data gas price. That's what we're talking about, right?
yeah.
So this PR is, I mean, it's not contentious, and it was sort of mostly agreed upon. And Roberto asked to include an extra field. So this basically include these fields in the RPC. and basically does not affect DevNet or the consensus.
Right.
But also, I think, I mean, it's non-contentious, so we can just approve it. There are some edits regarding some typos. I think we can just include them and try to merge this PR.
Yeah. And I see there's a comment by Light Client around there's more RPC changes for Cancun, so we wanted to merge all of them together. Is that still the case? Oh, I don't know if you have a mic, Light Client.
Hey, yeah. I think this is mostly it. I'm not sure how we need if there needs to be changes for the RPC to submit blob transactions, and I don't know. I'm not sure if there's anything else that needs to be changed. Probably something for like the actual transaction objects to denote to their blob transactions as well.
Okay, so are you saying that even if we merge this, there's some other change that will need to be done in order to expose the blob transactions via JSON RPC? Is that right? Or to
Right. I don't think that we have the blob transactions defined for like ETH get block, and we don't have them defined. I mean, we kind of accept them for send raw transaction because we just get RLP. So I'm not sure if that anything needs to be done if I want to submit a blob transaction to the transaction pool. But I think that there are still some things around like the actual transaction object that need to be specified.
Got it. So in that case, does it?
I don't really think this is blocking the DevNet though.
Yeah. Right. So does it make sense to, like, whether or not we merge this, have as like a target get for DevNet 7, the one after this, to have full JSON RPC support for blob transactions? I have 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. Okay. Okay. So I mean, we can or cannot merge this, but I think, yeah, let's not have the full RPC support in scope for DevNet 6, and let's try to target that for DevNet 7.
I have one more thing to mention, that we would like every client to include a trusted setup file flag in their implementation, where we could possibly override the trusted setup txt or JSON file.
For DevNet 6?
This should happen, yes. Okay. This should happen during runtime and not during compilation time.
Okay. Any client have a problem or objection with that?
Yeah, there's a note about this in the top of the spec.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, the blue section. Okay, nice. Okay, anything else on DevNet 6? Okay, perfect. And yeah, so we have a call Monday as well about 4844, so we can discuss any specifics with the client implementations and whatnot there. Okay, so next up, the rest of Cancun. Alex, you had a question around the spec for 4788, so we can do this first. And I think after that, it probably makes sense to hear from clients one last time about whether there's anything else we want to include alongside the currently included EIPs, so that we can start basically finalizing the scope of implementation for Cancun. But yeah, Alex, do you want to talk about the issues around 4788 and state growth?
Sure. So EIP 4788, this is essentially a cross-layer EIP. So what it's doing is taking the parent beacon block root from the CL, and the CL sends that over with each execution payload. the execution layer then basically writes that into the execution state in a place that everyone can look up. And so now we have access to this inside the EVM, which is really good for a lot of different applications. Yeah. So the question here is, what exactly does this look like? The way the AP is written now is there's a precompile that kind of exposes this part of the state. And the question then is like, what is the interface to this precompile, essentially? We've had a little back and forth about this, and we talked about this some on the EL call last week, but essentially where things have gotten to now is that it's written by the root, and then basically what's behind the root is the timestamp from the header. So the idea is like, if I want to use this thing, I can call the precompile with the root, and if the root was valid, I'll get back the timestamp. I can then use the timestamp if I want in the VM to like prove the slot and do all sorts of things from there. The thing is, the way this works is that there's no easy way now to limit how many writes there are. Before it was written by, say, the timestamp in the header, so you could do like some ring buffer thing based on time. So what that means is, as written now, the EAP has like unbounded state growth. And I did the calculation, it's something like 80 megabytes per year, assuming a block every slot. So, you know, it's not nothing. And generally it'd be good just to like bound this where we could. So the question then is, how do we do that? A really natural way is just to flip how this thing is indexed. So rather than do, you know, the key is the root and the value is the timestamp, is you just flip it and then have some like, you know, say modulo some period of time for the timestamp, and then now this thing is bounded. So this works. The one thing that's a little weird is that if we really want to like stick to this invariant that the EL does not know any CL information, then what the EL gets is every 12 seconds, every seconds per slot, you just get another root. And then, you know, the thing you would naturally do is just write every last second, or every second since you last wrote, you would write the root again. And what this means is that basically there's like 12 writes, of which 11 will like never be used. Yeah,
and
I guess
11 of
I'll
them
stop
would be
there.
zeros, right? Because it doesn't know that they're what happened in the middle.
Well, you do, because nothing
Well, that's
changed.
a design decision, I suppose. It isn't.
Well, but this, yeah. And so here's the other thing is that like anyone reading this will just probably optimize it and be like, hey, like there's only one write every 12 seconds. That's just what I'm going to do. You could, well, okay, actually, Danny, the reason you wouldn't do that is because you want callers to probably be able to like give any timestamp. So the idea is like, for this timestamp, kind of which slot are you in, and here's the root.
Well, you could also argue that callers know when blocks happen and can just, well, so
Sure, yeah.
yeah, I mean, the semantics are a bit weird if you have something that you can call on like modulo 11, but I don't see anything wrong with those semantics.
Yeah. So, yeah, any questions? It would be best to bound the state growth. So then, yeah, I guess we just go ahead and make the swap, and then that's that. From there, I'd really like to all agree on shipping this in Cancun.
Okay, and yeah, just to separate those two things. So first, any objections to just bounding the size of growth?
Given the depth of history that we want, and given that we'd have the 12x multiplier on timestamp, is there what's the size of the ring buffer?
Well, we could still target about a day. So that's what I was thinking, just to mirror the period on the CL, because we have a similar construction there. And we can figure it out so that's the same amount of data, basically.
That's like 230 megs. No, that's not. I mean, bounded 230 megs is better than unbounded 80 megs a year, in my opinion. Not that
It
either
is,
of them
but
matters that much.
it's still, yeah, I don't know, high.
Yeah, and that number is I'm doing 225 times 32 times 32 to get the bytes.
Okay, yeah. Let's see. I mean, we
I don't,
can make the window shorter. So
sorry, it's
anyways, I don't know.
230, it's 230 kilobytes. I apologize. That's
Oh,
much
okay.
better. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fun.
Either way, the numbers can be tuned so it's like a small bounded amount of space. And like I've talked to different staking pools, they're okay with any of these different designs in terms of the next. And like as long as it's not like you have to get your transaction in the same block that the root is, I think they're okay with some amount of look behind.
And I think it's probably much easier to start it off bounded, even if we eventually wanted it to grow unbounded for whatever reason. But if we do the other way around, we will never be able to bound it because someone will be relying on the first beacon route that was ever posted for something.
Yeah, exactly.
So just not have, like whether it's a day, whether it's like an hour, whether it's a week, I think that will lead to like different design and like applications, and we should probably nudge towards that.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't love the like writes for every second. It doesn't really matter. I have, as I'm thinking about it now, like it is nice because you could upgrade the slot time and the execution layer would never have to know, which is a nice property. So maybe that makes it worth it in and of itself. But I'm pretty fine with this if dubs are.
Any objections, I guess? Anyone think we should not do this? Okay.
I also
Oh.
don't like the extra rides.
Oh.
I think we should, like the caller knows the timestamp, so they should just give it to us.
Yeah, but if you don't know seconds per slot on the execution layer, I think you do need to sweep the interim.
Well, right, but you could just say the timestamp in the header is the value, and then like you're suggesting the rest of them are just zeros, and then it's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, you either need to do that with a map or with a ring buffer. If you do the map, you have the unbounded growth. If you do the ring buffer, you have to write either zeros or the root to the interim time slots, time seconds.
Dano?
Not objection to the idea, but just some design questions. Why put the precompile at the high Fs and not at the next precompiled position?
It can go wherever.
So the precompile and the state for the precompiler are in separate places right here, right? Like the precompile is actually in the low slots, at least the last time.
It's not right now, but it could be.
Okay.
Yeah, like I think it's a little weird to have them be separate, right? Because you could still call the state separately. So I think it makes sense to have the precompile be like an interface around the state at that address. From there, I just copied this from EIP, I forget, but essentially there was an earlier EIP that suggested moving block hashes from the execution layer to like a similar method where you'd have them in the state. And I think the idea was just this is a stateful precompile, so like toss it, say, at the top of the address space rather than at the bottom. But
from an EVM implementation, it doesn't care. It calls it and gets a value. And now we have to check two separate ranges for precompiles. So from implementation, it would be easier just to group them together. And I don't think that the stateful distinction is terribly useful to an implementation because it's going to be going to some method that's going to do something completely unrelated to EVM operation execution.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, my gut is to not have it in the high ranges. If this is a stateful precompile, just accept that we have stateful precompiles and put them with the rest. Has been my intuition.
Yep, totally. Especially because we have already like tests for it, and all the precompiles have one way at least, like the first 10, 24, and we also have those set on basically every test net, and so yeah, there's a bunch of things that can go wrong if a precompile doesn't have any money. So just having them in the normal precompile range can make sure that they're always funded.
Yep, that's easy to do, and I can definitely do that.
Okay, any other comments or thoughts? Okay, so I guess, yeah, last thing for Cancun, I'd be curious to hear just from client teams, of like the EIPs we've been discussing in the past few weeks. Is there anything that folks think should go in Cancun? So I can post the link in the agenda or in the chat, sorry, right here. But basically, we have already 1153, 4844, and 6780. So the transient storage, blob transactions, and self-destruct removal. And then we had a bunch of CFI DIPs, so 2735, the BLS recompile, 4788, which we just talked about. And then a couple opcodes, so mcopy, pay, and then the revamped call instructions, which we discussed last time. Yeah. I see. Is this Marek from Nethermind? Is also.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So some support in Nethermind for 4788. Yeah, I don't know if any client team wants to just share their thoughts about, yeah, what they'd like to include. If not, I mean, does anyone not want to include 4788? Okay, this is the last chance. Okay, so let's include 4788. Final chance if anyone has an objection. And then of the rest of the basically 4 other EIPs, so BLS, mcopy, pay, and the revamped call instructions, is there anything else that people would like to include?
Well, Aragon would like to include the pay opcode.
Okay, so there's a comment for pay, a comment for mcopy in the chat that came at the same time. Okay, so I guess, yeah, let's start with pay. Does anyone feel strongly for or against the pay opcode? Maris and Tomasz are saying they'd like to keep the scope. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I feel strongly against the pay opcode because it introduces a new way how basically how accounts can be touched, which is always kind of complicated. I also don't really see the point in having the pay opcode when we have the call opcodes already. I know, yeah, I know that there are some security issues with the call opcodes, but yeah, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as very much needed right now, and so it's not really a priority for me. So I don't think we should rush it into a hard fork.
Yeah, Andrew, I don't know if you want to make the case for the pay opcode or.
No, I think, well, if there is no consensus, then it's okay to skip it.
Okay. I guess the next one, so like client, you mentioned mcopy, and Charles, I see you have your hand up. I assume it's about this as well. Do you want to, either of you want to do a quick pitch for mcopy?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about mcopy and pay. Well, let me address pay first. I think it's pretty important to, first of all, I work on Viper. I think it's pretty important to get into the EVM. I understand that there's concerns about, implementation complexity, but it is important to be able to have a way to transfer Ether without transferring, execution context. There's a lot, really, like, I don't know, I have to go through the list, but, I think like 30 to 50% of, these high profile hacks are related to actually transferring Ether. And people are always switching to using Gweth instead of ETH. We have a lot of, warts in the EVM that are kind of like a result of having to, deal with this gas stipend for call. People are always trying to like figure out how to transfer Ether, and then you have to do these either explicitly check for reentrancy or try to hard code a limited gas stipend in order to prevent these kinds of weird things with computation being transferred to not yourself. So that's the case for pay. I understand if it doesn't make it into this hard fork, but I think that it should be really strongly considered, maybe for the next one. And then the case for mcopy is in my view pretty straightforward too. It's pretty straightforward to implement. It doesn't have too much, well, as far as I know, any interaction with the other EIPs that are considered for Cancun, and it would help compilers generate like much better code, really. So improving on code size and gas. And if anybody's interested, I can kind of prototype to some things to see really how much better code size would be and gas with mcopy as opposed to the current state of things where we have to issue a lot of M stores and M loads, which is, in my opinion, kind of wasteful, especially when we have call data copy and code copy. And the semantics of it are pretty clear to everybody too, I think. So yeah, I think that's the case.
Got it. Thanks. Andrew?
Yeah, I have a question about the pay opcode versus the proposed Code2 app code. Does Code2 also suffer from the reentrancy problem that pay solves?
As far as I know, Call2 doesn't really change anything except gas observability, and it removes the output buffer. So yes, it still transfers execution context to the callee, which is the fundamental problem with transferring Ether using any call opcode.
Understood.
Okay.
Somebody asked in the chat if there's the transfer property of self-destruct. Self-destruct transfers all Ether. Pay allows you to send some amount of Ether, and it's also a lot less wasteful in terms of gas and, I suppose, touching state, because you don't have to create and destroy contract.
Okay, so I think, yeah, given like the points Marius raised, it probably makes sense to not include pay for now. And I know, yeah, I guess I'm curious to hear on the mcopy side from client teams. Get seems to have internal disagreement about whether to include it. Nethermind seems to be leaning towards not including more in the fork. So I don't know. Yeah. Do any of the team feel strongly in favor or against including mcopy?
I really don't see the argument for not including mcopy. It's extremely simple. It mimics the functionality we already have with the identity contract. Is it a game-changing feature for Ethereum? It's not, but it's a relatively simple thing. And if we want to have any chance of doing a lot of the changes that we're trying to do in the future, then we need to be able to like do more than just like the one thing that we want to do in the fork. And so I don't think mcopy is adding that much to the service area. And I think
There's a couple comments in the chat about so BaseU has a PR for mcopy, but then maybe maybe it makes more sense to be bundled with EOF. And then Marius is asking if anyone looked at memory expansion attacks with mcopy. Charles, I don't know if you have an answer to this.
I mean, why would it be any different than with the identity contract?
It's not. It's not, and I think we had issues with the identity precompile. That's what I'm saying.
These are like separate things. Then, like if we have a problem with the identity precompile, then we need to sort that out.
No,
I think the issues. One of the issues with the identity precompile having to do with having to, transfer execution context to the identity precompile and transferring call frames and stuff. So I think mcopy is actually simpler than the identity copy here.
Yeah, it's definitely simpler.
The memory expansion attacks on mcopy is the same surface as mstore and mstore 8. It's all about where the highest bit of the write ends in the copy. So it doesn't truly open up any new novel surfaces. It's just the same well-trodden surfaces from my perspective.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And also call data copy and code copy have the same surface for writes. Maybe not reads, but for reads, the surface is the same as mload and identity copy. Sorry, the identity precompile. And because it's priced the same as other copy operations. So,
yeah, that's basically what I was asking, if someone has already looked at it, and you guys seem very confident that it's not an issue.
There is a cost, which is memory expansion cost, right? But there is no quadratic cost on the length of copied in the proposed solution. So if you copy a lot of words, then you have just linear increase of the cost, which opens potentially attack if you cannot load to memory just that particular copy, even if you copy in the same place. So you don't have memory expansion cost at all because you're not expanding memory, but you're actually expanding a lot the temporary memory needed for the EVM, right? Or are you doing it word by word?
No, you're not. The spec is written. It says that memory expansion works as if you copy to a temporary buffer, but all real memory copy implementations just branch to see if there's overlap, and if the overlap is a certain way, then it copies backwards instead of forwards. So there's no actual temporary buffer happening.
Okay, yeah, so temporary buffer is practically doing word by word copying. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
No, it's a reasonable concern, and I have to look into it for a little bit.
I guess, yeah, maybe, so on Get and BaseU seem somewhat split on this. Tomasz, you said that you'd rather not have new things okay, you're neutral now. I don't know, Aragon, do you have? Yeah.
Neutral.
Okay. So
It can wait for EOF. If there's it is a fairly late ad, and with the pushback, I just don't think it's worth pushing it through.
Okay. I guess, does anyone still strongly feel we should include it? And maybe one option is, if the concern is mostly around the scope of the fork, does it make sense to leave that as like the one CFI thing, implement everything else, and see, how we're feeling in a couple weeks in terms of implementation? Or if we wanted to do this, should we make the decision now so that we can start setting up both testing and like implementations to support the entire scope?
We'll need tests, but I think the block precompiles are more important than these tests, so it need to be prioritized in order from the testing team.
You mean the beacon root precompiles?
Yeah, the beacon root precompiles.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh. Okay, so Matt, I think people are like at best neutral around the EIP for the fork. And I guess two options is, one, we just push it back to the next fork, and another option is maybe we leave it as the only CFI things and we see how implementation goes with everything else and whether we want to add it in a few weeks. Yeah.
I feel like if we can't do mcopy in this fork, then we have no chance of doing EOF ever. Like the surface of EOF is quite a bit bigger, I think, than what we're facing right now in terms of unique things. So I would prefer that we try to do mcopy now and try just to understand, like, is the surface too big? Like, we can always remove it later on if we're like, look, this is just, people feel uncomfortable with this testing surface, because that's been the biggest thing that I've heard so far, is that the increase of testing surface makes people uncomfortable. And I would rather go down the path and figure out what happens in a couple months if we try and implement it, put it in the forks, do the tests, and if people still feel that way in a couple months, and then if they do, then we just remove it. But if we don't do it, then we're never going to be able to see the changes coming.
Tomasz, do you still have your hand up for the previous time, or do you want to add? I see you have.
No, lower my cancer. I wrote in the chat that well, I agree with the reasoning of Light Client that this seems to be simple, reasonable change in line with many of our goals, like moving away from precompiles, going towards EOF. So for that reason, it perfectly makes sense as an AP. And the only reason why I was saying potentially no is if the teams feel like we don't want to add more things to test, more things to cross test. So it's more of a scope of the fork question rather than the EIP itself.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I totally get that, and I am in the same boat around these things. But I think that we need to test ourselves a little bit if we're still thinking about having EOF on the roadmap, because if we can't, like, again, like I don't think we're going to be able to do EOF. The surface area for EOF is quite a bit larger in the EVM than what we're facing right now. And to me, it's like if we go down this path and we think the surface area was too big, we had to take out mcopy the last minute, that's a pretty good sign that we're probably not going to be able to do EOF, and maybe we should like just make that decision.
I guess, yeah, so based on Lucas's comments, I'd be curious to hear, just like from the testing teams, I don't know, Mario, if you're on, and yeah, do you, oh yeah, I see, okay. Mario Vega, like, yeah, do you think mcopy significantly like slows down testing efforts, or is it reasonably simple to write tests for?
I think we can definitely parallelize at the moment. The problem might be that we also have Hive testing, for example, for 4844. So that might, so if anyone wants to jump in to test mcopy, the state tests, I mean, it's definitely welcome too. So I don't see I mean, Marius had some comments that the scope might be too broad, but I don't think I totally agree. In my opinion, it should be doable. But yeah, and if anyone wants to jump in to implement those tests, the state tests for mcopy, that would be very nice.
And the state tests are the one using the new Python execution test, right?
Exactly. So we left to do is we have to implement a state test for this 4888. I'm sorry, 4788. And we already have a test for 4844, and we have to translate the 1153 tests to Python. So that's the remaining to-dos in terms of status for execution layer. I think we can do mcopy, but yeah, if anyone wants to jump in also to help with this, that's obviously gonna help a lot.
Charles?
I think Pavel from the Epsilon team was designing the tests and was starting to write them up, but I just pinged him to see what the progress of that is.
Okay, so I guess based on all of this, does it make sense to add mcopy in, and then in the next call or the one after, if we see that, like, you know, testing is like bottlenecked by it, and or client implementations feel like it's, I don't know, too much to add, we can always remove it. So like we can prioritize basically implementing 4788 and all the other EIPs that are already included. Add this one as well, and then, you know, if it is a relatively small change, we keep it in. But if we find some significant cause of delay, then we should consider pulling it out. And also, by doing that, close the door to anything else being included in Cancun.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I mean, we can give it a try just to see how much of a remaining test we have to implement, and then we can give an update in 2 weeks and see if it was too much, and then we can simply remove it.
Sounds good. Any objections or final thoughts? Okay, so we will add mcopy in alongside 4788. If in a couple of weeks we feel like mcopy is like significantly slowing down things, either from an implementation or testing perspective, we'll just kick it out. And we also will not add anything else to the fork. So this means the fork will effectively have 1153, 4844, 6780. So the transient storage, blob transaction, self-destruct removal, and then today we've added 4788, the beacon block roots, and then mcopy. And then the 3 other things that were CFI'd are just not included in this fork. Yeah, does that make sense to people? Okay. What else do we have on the agenda? Okay, next up, Mikhail, you had this change to the engine API we discussed, I don't know if it was last week or 3 weeks ago on ACDC, about having a single method, for the V3 engine API calls. You want to give some context on that?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Just real quick update from that. So we decided to move with one method, one structure approach since Cancun. So this is the DPR. It has a couple of validations that the clients has to do. Please everyone take a look. Any objections to how it is spec'd out, raise them. As I'm aiming to merge this early next week. And after this gets merged, we can outline the engine API spec for Cancun, which I guess will include probably a couple of other things. One of them is deprecation of exchange transition configuration that people were waiting for quite a long time. Another is probably the builder override flag, which worth discussion. So that's it. So please take a look at this PR, those who are interested. Lucas?
Yeah, I have a question. Would it be reasonable to, I know it would be a breaking change, to also apply it to V2, to like not allow V1 there? I know it's a breaking change, but it shouldn't break anything. We're already past the fork, everyone is using V2. So question from me here.
Yeah, I wouldn't. By default, I would not change the spec that is the repository is finalized. The main goal for this change is that it prevents us from ever-growing complexity of support in all versions that we had before. And I think that for V2 we can remain it. We can just leave it as is.
Okay, it would slightly simplify our code base because we had this generic way of doing that, and now we will be specific. But yeah, it's fine. And I think Nevermind already has this implemented as your proposal right now. So yeah, that's how we have it.
Cool.
Any other thoughts, comments? Okay. Okay, so and then last thing we had on the agenda, this is more of a CL thing, but basically Enrico wanted to chat about honest validator behavior for data availability and duty production. Do you want to give some quick context there, Enrico?
Yeah, sure. So I was bringing this up because I have this. I remembered this conversation around with probably in Discord with any other guys, and the implication of that could have some engineering implication if we do one way or the other. But point is that should we start validating, testing, and producing blocks before we actually have downloaded all the blobs up to the very end of the data availability window, or we could start doing duties once we reach the head and downloaded everything? Because from the spec, at least things I remember before, we could consider everything valid only until we have the entire data availability window downloaded and validated. Am I right here?
Yeah, so based on past conversations and based on how the spec is written right now, you would be short-circuiting the validity condition if you started testing before, and is not the intended behavior. So I believe that that's how the honest behavior would read based off of the is data available function. But if that's not clear, I think we should.
Right. So actually, the UX will be slightly affected here if you want to, for instance, switch CL and you just remain with the same EL that is already in sync. Then you wipe out the database, which means that you can checkpoint sync quickly, reach the head, and then wait the full delivery to be downloaded. And the client should start behaving like we should download all the availability as quick as possible, while it's not just an historical sync that currently is kind of low priority download, but now we should start changing internally how the client behaves there, because we want to reach the availability
boundary as quick as possible.
Right. So I mean, you could imagine some like local UX affordance where you could just dump that data and import it directly if there was actually like if this UX you thought was like really high priority. But I do think that if we don't do that DA check and kind of just when you're initially syncing, then we kind of like begin to break the honest behavior. Not radically so, but putting a chip in it in a way that I think could not prove.
Right. Okay. So it's an item that we actually have to work on because
yeah. What's the amount of data on the current window?
Gigabytes. Don't have the number at the moment, but is 33 gigabytes. I don't know. Is the calculated on 4 blobs?
Yeah, is that 3.6 or 4.24?
So yeah, it will take some time, and yeah, it's kind of it could be felt by the users for sure.
How much
yeah,
time
I mean, if people want to think
to
about the
pull this data?
Sorry.
I was just wondering how much time it will take to pull this data because there is the EL client which is syncing as well, so it probably won't be a terrible UX experience.
I'm focusing particularly if you already have an EL that is up and running. If you have to sync both of them, definitely you still have to sync the EL2. Probably the EL will take more time, but there will be contentions on the bandwidth for sure. So yeah, everything will be slower.
Okay, I'm not 100% sure what the right next step is here.
Yeah, let's pick it up on the consider call.
Yeah.
If there's, if it's a UX that we care about, then there might be some like standards around dumping and porting data and stuff. But I'm happy to pick it up there when we have more people with context.
Well, the action point here is maybe make things definitely clearer in the validator, honest validator. Just drop maybe a line that says clearly, this is honest behavior. At least for my understanding, maybe other.
Yeah, I can put up a PR to that. Just, I think it's implicitly clear with the definition of the function, but a note that just says, note, thus you must backfill.
Yeah, because consider valid until all valid blobs have been downloaded. What do you mean by all in this case? Could be related to the blobs that you're validating at the moment. So for that block, all here is intended by all blobs for the entire availability window.
Yeah, and I'll do a pass on it just to make sure the language is clear. Based off of a handful of iterations that might be, as you point out, not so clear. But I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Okay, so Marius wanted to talk more about the blob number. We can do that, but right before, I guess, Barnabas, you wanted to give a shout out to the new testnet call next Thursday. So we can do that. And then if anyone who doesn't want to chat about blobs wants to leave, they can drop off and we can use the rest of the call to go into more blob conversation. Yeah, Barnabas?
Yes, we will have our first Holaski call next week on Thursday at 12:30 UTC time. And we would like to see client, everyone at least one person from each client team to show up to this. We would also like some node operators to also show up to this meeting.
Sounds good. Is there a, oh, I guess on the call, you're going to decide when Genesis would happen for the network?
Yes, we expect it to happen on merge day.
Okay, on
15th of September.
Okay, so and so I assume this means for the purposes of Denkun, we should still consider Gordy and Sepolia as like the main test nets, and you know, if like there's a world where Denkun has already happened when this goes live, maybe not, but if this is going to go live in September, we shouldn't count on it as like a test net for this fork, correct?
Well, I assume Denkun will, if it doesn't happen before September, then we can also use this testnet to test Denkun also.
Right.
I would actually say that we should definitely use this one because the idea is that this testnet is bigger than Curly and bigger than mainnet. So it would be the first opportunity for us to test like how we perform with a large number of validators.
Got it. In that case, and unfortunately, I don't think I can make the call because it's 4:30 a.m. I think my time. But I would potentially push to start it 1 or 2 months before September 15th, so that we're like if we're ready to fork a first testnet or second testnet in the summer, then having this one ready would be good.
We would probably need. I don't think we would have the time, to be honest, to launch it multiple months before the September deadline, because we would need like proper client releases, and we would need quite some organization for this because we plan to run our validator set than mainnet, significantly larger, and for that we, like client teams, will probably need dedicated infrastructure to run it. So this is going to be a significant deployment, and
Got
it
it.
will require quite some planning. So this is why it would be very good if we could have someone from each client team to show up in this call next week, because we're going to discuss the details there.
Okay, sounds good. Any client team have thoughts or comments they want to share now? Okay. So if anyone wants to not talk about blobs more, this is your chance to drop. Otherwise, Marius, you had some comments saying the Get team felt uncomfortable with the 3.6 change.
Yes, sorry. I joined 5 minutes late, so I missed the discussion at the beginning of the call, where apparently this decision was made. Yes, so I have prepared a statement. No, I have not prepared a statement. But the thing is, during these tests, we've seen that with 1 megabyte blocks, we start to lose attestations quite quickly. What this suggests to me is, and these blocks are possible right now, what that suggests to me is that we already have too big of a gas limit. And it could already be the case that if someone would send these big blocks for an extended period of time, then a lot of nodes would not have enough time to attest to them, and thus we would lose a lot of attestations. Now,
there's no indication though that this is like, so yes, we lose attestations, but why do we lose them? It is only due to the reason that these blocks are late, like that they arrive past the 4-second slot time. And blocks arriving very close to that already happens. Like, I mean, look at those graphs and see that even outside our tests, you see those late blocks, not quite as late, but like very close to that, and you see drops in attestations.
Yes.
So I think the argument here is not that this is like there's no sustained effect on the network. Like all those nodes are well able to catch up with the network. They just see that particular block late. So I think the case is actually just that our 4-second deadline is too aggressive, and not that this is too much load for the network.
Yeah, but we have that 4-second deadline for a reason, right?
Well, we can change it. I mean, I would actually suggest that.
Well, but we do not have that's not something we can do tomorrow. That's not something we have a lot of data on. That's not
Sure,
something that,
but
like,
whatever
we
it is,
understand
like, I mean, I
anything
want to
about.
push back against the claim that this is net stability of the network or
Okay,
something.
but
it is one
Dr.
particular very aggressive deadline that we have.
But so I think the strongest argument here is that when you increase the target of large data payloads, which you do with blobs, so you would regularly get that, you decrease the cost to push that over a threshold with call data.
Yes, totally. That's exactly my point. Like we can do this right now, and the only thing that is prohibiting us from creating these big blocks is cost. And with 4844, we make this attack way cheaper. And we all we have to all be like clear about this. Like this is the case, and we're fine with it. And I'm also fine with decreasing the cost for this attack because I don't still think this attack is kind of extremely costly and cannot be sustained for very long. But I think in the we just have to be clear about this. We're making this attack more possible than it is right now, and with increased blob count, we make it even easier to do. And so my suggestion would be to start slow with 2.4, which is already kind of high in most cases, and then we can, if we see that this works reliably on mainnet for a long time, we can increase it. Yeah, I think this is.
Yeah, I mean, I
just
always think it's too conservative. Like in my opinion, even 3.6. I mean, I'm pushing for that because I've seen that this worked reliably. But I know that there's a lot of demand out there. There are so many teams right now building on those blobs and really wanting those. And we're already very late at delivering these. Like, it's just like we are always making the most conservative decisions, and like it's like
yes, because we have to. Because it's like it's a $1 billion ecosystem, and if we make rush decisions and we realize that like 10% or 20% of the nodes are falling off the network because they cannot reliably follow the chain anymore, then that is really.
Sorry, there's
really
no
bad.
reason. There's no reason that indicates what you're saying. That is completely wrong. Like I think that's ridiculous. Like we haven't seen like a late attestation doesn't mean that you're pushed off the network. A late attestation just means that you miss a little bit of your reward, and you're still attaching to the chain, you're still finalizing the chain, and so on.
And that the block has a higher chance of being reorged.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, I would suspect that in this case where this happened, because we have seen like a 1.7 megabyte block that was included, no problems. So there's a high chance that this proposer already had other problems going on. Like they probably only published their, maybe they were actually like gaming MEV and published their block 2 seconds late already. And in this particular instance, it went wrong. So I don't know.
Ansgar, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I would say just in terms of process here, I think Marius's concerns are somewhat warranted, at least it sounds to me like, but given that we debated this quite a bit earlier, and there was, I mean, even some people in favor of 4.8, I think I'd personally be be against walking this back now, because some people have also already left the call, and we can always change the spec at some of the future calls before we actually have the fork. It seems like a sane default for the testnet at least. And I think if this is a concern, then I think we should just in general study potential ways to address this, the potential change of the 4-second window. Also, I think a potential call data cost increase, a small one for Cancun might be something we would want to consider. But I think walking the earlier decision back now would just not be the proper process here.
Well, I guess so on the process bit, like I think we're still in the main call time, and I think pretty much all the 4.4 people are still here. But the thing that I want to avoid is like if we drop, is like having clients do useless work of like implementing the change and then reverting it in 2 weeks. So yeah, so
I mean the change is just changing a constant, right?
Right. So I mean if that's the case, yeah, I'd probably lean towards we keep 3.6 for the DevNet, but I do see Marius's argument where like the DevNet is not going to tell us about the potential concerns we'd see on mainnet, right? And I don't think we're going to resolve that in the next like 5 minutes, but we can discuss it on the call Monday potentially.
So I'm not against having the DevNet with 3.6 if we don't take this as an indication for mainnet, because it's useless. Like it's just like it's just different for mainnet. So
so does it make sense
for me to?
So Marius, I mean, my counterclaim here is if you're making this argument, you should make the argument that actually like we should limit current blocks much more than we should limit blocks. Like I find this very strange that we're making always these decisions and we are always much more conservative on whatever new we're introducing compared to all the existing stuff that's already like pretty dosable.
Yeah.
Like I'm sorry, like why are you not making with the same force? Why you're not coming with the same force out here and saying we should limit blocks to 700 kilobytes?
Because it's
then I will take you more seriously. But this one, I feel like it's just it doesn't make sense to me.
That's nice of you if you take me more seriously. Then I've been saying for a really long time that 30 million gas is too much, and is a lot.
Sure, but I mean, clearly, like the Ethereum, like community as a whole, has not considered that, like, to be what the direction they want to take. So I kind of feel like now it seems not fair that now it seems not fair that suddenly all core devs override the Ethereum community on this in the case of blocks. Like well, clearly,
I'm not
like if this is the case, then maybe we should add the voting to the network on blocks the same way it works on gas now, and let the community decide on this, what they're comfortable with.
But then you delay for 4 by 6 months. So, yeah, I think. Like, so clearly we're not going to resolve this now. I do think like it's probably worth going ahead with the 3.6 on the DevNet, and then maybe using the 4.4 call on Monday to focus on specifically what we would want to see to convince ourselves that like this is safe for mainnet. If there's anything missing, I don't know, Marius, if you can be there on Monday, or someone from Geth can be there. But yeah, I think it probably makes sense to have like a longer discussion about that there. Okay. Yeah, Lucas, I'm not sure how serious of a suggestion that was, but we currently vote on the gas limit, which is basically the same thing, right? Okay. Anything else before we wrap up? Okay. Well, thanks everyone. So we decided, okay, we're keeping 3.6 for the DevNet. We'll see whether we want to make this the mainnet constants, and we can discuss on the 4.4 call Monday what potential issues there are with making 3.6, moving 3.6 to mainnet. Sweet. Anything else? Okay, well, thanks everyone. Talk to you all on Monday.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Bye.